Hello, Robert Lingard here. Welcome to Deviance in Society. As part of my promise to you, we're going to exotic locations and making the most of our time in these lectures. As you can see, I am in Lennox Head, and all these constant reminders around me that my life isn't quite as good as it should be. I should be living here in an apartment close to the beach. There are these reminders that we have Australian dreams and expectations and that we need to be conforming to them. But it's not just that there are these expectations about how we might live and the ways that we might be able to ensure that our life is good and going the way that we'd really like. We also have the means presented to us whereby we can achieve these cultural and social goals. Now, as you can see, I'm here in the wonderful shopping area of Lennox, really quite distinctive. Some really nice shops here with selling a whole range of things. Here we've got bulk foods. Here, the reminder that I actually don't look as good as I should, and maybe I need some more clay on my skin. Lots of different things here to help me achieve the cultural and social goals that as part of society in some way I've also consented to being a part of. Now, as you go through the shops these days, I imagine that you will see all the usual signs of all the things that can be bought, perhaps the pretty pictures up there reminding you of why you should be looking better and why you don't match up to the norms or the expectations, or perhaps why your walls aren't as nicely decorated as these ones. But as you'll see in the shops, there's an abundance now of other signs that are appearing. This shop here, as you see, the signs are mostly about health expectations. Check in, use hand sanitizer, make sure you wear a mask, QR code, and only one sign here about how they're running their business, no food or drink. And then there are these other considerations that we find about hand sanitizer, QR codes, and reminders about public health and mask wearing. Now, mask wearing is not going to be a problem for me. As you can see, I am wonderfully adorned in my own mask, but I'm finding it interesting at the moment that alongside the health reports that we get on the news, and they're coming daily, if not more than daily, that now, at least for New South Wales, in addition to the counts of how many people are in hospital, a policeman gets up and announces how many people have been fined for violations of not wearing the mask or for being out and about rather than adhering to public health orders. Now, I'm out in the open air here, not many people around. I'm just going to take mine off because it's very hot with it on and a little bit muffling. So, what do we do with all of this? Clearly, we live in a society with lots of structures and lots of things happening so as to ensure that we have a society that is stable and is safe and achieves the goals that we as a society think are important. And as I said, in the shops, we're reminded that some of our goals are that our lives need to be better, we need to have nicer homes, we need to look better, we need to be dressed better. And alongside that, we have the means to achieve it. So there are shops there, we can save up our money, work hard, save up, go in, buy the things that we need, and thereby achieve our goals. Except there are also things in those shops to deal with the issue that sometimes not everybody uses the legitimate means of achieving their goals. So we know that theft is a problem, shoplifting, and in all manners of life, we will find that social deviancy along the scale through to criminality is something that needs to be dealt with and thought through. And there are different ways to think it through as sociologists. So there are 5 different theories that we're going to look at, 5 different approaches to understanding deviancy and its place in society. In this session, we're going to consider normative theories, and then subsequent sessions, We're going to look at labelling theory. We're going to look at postmodernism, at feminism, and there was the fifth one. Let me check my notes. Political economy, of course. This session, though, we're going to focus on normative theory. We're going to look at functionalism. As you would be aware, functionalism studies how society works. How do all the parts come together? How do individuals fit into groups, and how do those groups then work together to build a society in which there is harmony? Now, Durkheim, when he looked at it, said that society is going to be successful when people are properly integrated into society, when they know their place, when the groups of which they are a part also know what their place is. How do they come together? What do they do together? How does that contribute to the greater functioning of society? So functionalism looks at the way all the parts come together. However, they don't always work that way. And there are people who step outside the expected norms. So in that case, deviancy is what happens when someone is not working according to the norms, and they may not therefore be contributing to the social harmony and social integration within society. If they're not socially integrated, then we can expect there to be deviancy. Deviancy and the breaking of social norms are very much wedded together in normative theory. As we consider functionalism and normative theory, we also need to think about what might be the problem that we have with deviancy. Deviancy actually can pose serious threat to social cohesion. If everybody is rebelling, then there are problems with the way that society is going to operate. And so there needs to be social sanctions come down so as either to prevent deviancy or at least to curb it or to modify its effects. So one of the outcomes of the normative approach is there is an advocacy for there to be social controls to ensure that all the parts of society are working together cohesively, and that where there are those stepping outside of those social norms, that we can deal with that very quickly and very swiftly, with the idea of ensuring the continuity and the harmony of society. That said, deviancy may also prove to have a positive function within society. Now, while we see deviancy as something that needs to be stamped down on in many regards, deviancy actually has been observed to serve function. One of the functions, of course, is that when deviancy is identified, then it helps us to set the boundaries for what is acceptable behaviour within our society. So that means that we are able to say, here are the sanctions, these are the punishments and the consequences of deviancy. And when we do that, then the whole of society, not just those who have broken through the norms, but the whole society is then reminded about what is acceptable and appropriate behaviour within our societal cultures and contexts. So that's one function. The second function is that deviancy can also result in a closer binding of people in society together. Now, an example of that, tragic example of that, is when there are terrible things happen in society like terrorist threats. People express outrage, communities are brought together, and there are reactions societally wide that say, no, this is not acceptable behaviour. And in identifying in those ways, then society is also shown to be brought more closely together and increase that functional aspect that it may be observed to possess. Now, despite trying to curb deviancy in many aspects, society also benefits from it in that deviance may result in innovation and progression within a society. So those who stand up and say, no, these sanctions are no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable to discriminate against Aboriginal peoples. those people were deviants in many ways at the time when they were speaking up. They were breaking many societal norms, not the least the fact that voice was being given to people of different racial backgrounds than the dominant white culture. But persistence in those sorts of deviance means that new ideas are brought into society and structures restructure themselves, and society progresses through new innovation that is brought in. So deviance, while it is often looked down upon and we know of sanctions and criminality resulting, we can also see that it may actually prove to be of benefit to our society as well. So deviance, something that is sanctioned, may result in criminality, but it's also something that may actually serve society well. Now, I said we're looking at functional theories of deviance today. So there are four particular theories that we're going to look at. The first one, these will be just briefly outlined, and then we'll take a little bit deeper analysis of one of the particular theories. The first one, though, is differential association. Now, differential association was put forward by Sutherland. It poses the idea that deviance isn't just something you come up with, but deviance is something that is learned and can be taught. So that acknowledges that deviance is a behavior the same as any other behavior and involves a socialization of individuals within particular cultures, contexts, behaviors, attitudes. So if you're being socialized into deviant behavior, then like any other sort of behavior, it means learning what the techniques are consistent with that sort of behavior that you're being involved in. So what do you actually do? How do you go about it? But also, what are the attitudes that one needs to adopt to be involved in these behaviors? And what are the rationales that support it as an ongoing means of behaving within society? In addition to our differential association, there's also neutralization. This is one that I think we've seen a lot of it expressed in the media, particularly around events in the US over the last 12 months or so. Neutralization is when you engage in what would be perceived as norm-breaking behavior, but you deflect it. You neutralize it by saying, well, it was actually fake news. No, you're pointing the finger at me, but actually you're the one who's in the wrong here. Or, I did that, but really, she deserved it. So it's a matter of denying the behaviors or denying that there was any injury or damage resulting, or just shifting the blame entirely. So that's one way that normative theory understands deviant behavior, that it can be justified and shifted around by this neutralization that also may be argued. And as I said, I think we've seen a lot of that in fairly recent news. Following on from that, there is bond theory. The idea of Hershey here in bond theory is that it's the bonds that hold people together and therefore work against the development of deviant behaviors. So that means that when we have attachments to people, when we are involved with others with whom we have shared values, shared attitudes, then the bonds that develop between us ensure that we are closely integrated and not prone to deviant behavior. So that will apply to the individuals, but also further up the chain as each of the parts of society are bonded together through commonalities. Now, the fourth theory that I said we would look at is Merton's theory. Merton was one who was looking at the way that the American dream was proposed as the great, wonderful and ultimate goal in America. So there was this great emphasis on what you could be and what you can attain and what you can achieve in society. But he said that in promoting this type of cultural goal, we create a strain that people react to. Now, part of normative theory assumes that there will always be deviancy and criminality. But Merton is saying that it would seem to be part of the cultural arrangement whereby we set up these almighty goals that we all in some way accede to and are subject to wanting to attain. So we've got these wonderful goals. I spoke earlier about this goal of public health and safety at the moment that we have in Australia, and I dare say globally. And I suspect that that is one of the great goals that we have as a culture. And it's one that is not being questioned an awful lot out loud, whether you agree with it or not. Surely this also is something for us to problematize as sociologists. So Merton says we have these goals, these great big goals that we have in our society and in our cultures. What do we do with them? Well, we say you need to attain these things, and these are things that you will want to get, and in doing that you will know that you are successful within our societal context. Great. So the goal is to be wealthy and comfortable and healthy and be able to travel and wear the latest designer gear and have all the entertainment mod cons. Well, how do we achieve that? Okay, that involves expenditure. We achieve that through working, at least. These are the culturally acceptable means of working towards the attainment of our goals. But do we have to use the acceptable means in order to attain these things? Surely shoplifting is one unacceptable way, deemed as widely unacceptable in our culture. Shoplifting is not the conventional way of attaining the goods that you need for yourself in order to say that you are successful when measured against societal goals. Now, Merton said that because of these goals that we have and these conventional means of attainment, then we need to adapt in order to be conforming in society, or at least in order to react to the things that we are presented with. Now, I have a writing board here with me. We'll just swap to it. Merton said that we have our goals. You can accept them or you can reject them. But also, we have the means, the conventional means of attaining these things. And again, you can go with the convention or you can reject it. So there is this strain between what is the acceptable goal and the means that we are able to access or not access in order to achieve what we are seeking to do. Now, part of what he's identified is that within our society there are unequal opportunities for people to achieve their goals by access to different means, by access to jobs, to wealth, to opportunity. And that will affect the way that people are able to achieve their goals, and therefore the amount of strain that they feel upon themselves. So how do we respond to this? We adapt. Now, if we support going for our goals and we support the idea of the conventional means, then we can conform to the society around us. However, it's possible also to say that I like the goals that we have in our society. Oh, there's a little bit of erasure, how's that? I support the goals in our society, but I don't like the conventional way of achieving them. Therefore, that's a capital I that I'm drawing there. Therefore, we can innovate. Oh, I really have to innovate to get I. So we can come up with new ways of doing things, new ways of achieving our goals. Now, they're non-conventional, so in that way we have some deviance behavior as well. We can say that we agree with the means, but we don't like the goals, in which case we just sort of go along with it. So, yeah, we'll play the game, don't really go with the goals, but I'm not going to stick my neck out. Merton referred to this as ritualism. So, sort of like playing the game, going along with it, but not actually sticking your neck out. You have the appearance of being conformist, but actually, you're not really there. So that was ritualism, but this is retreatism. I can't spell on the beach. Retreatism. So this is when you say, I actually reject the goals and I actually reject the means. This is a really difficult position to be in, as Merton points out, that these are people who aren't really in society as such. They're sort of retreating out and not really being a part of what is going on in society. Now, there is another position that he identified as well, and that is, what if you don't just reject the goals, and what if you don't just reject the means, but you also want to start something completely new and something completely different? There we go, erasure again. Merton identified that if you reject the goals, reject the means, but want to replace them with something else, then what we have then is a situation of rebellion. So that is when we get the situation of enemy, when laws start to break down and social controls also start to fade away. Have a look at Merton's work. You'll find there's a paper provided for you in the materials for this week. It's really interesting to read the work that he's done on this area. But remember, we're trying to identify what are the reasons for deviant behavior over against what might be considered normative behavior that holds society together. There are a range of theories. We've considered very, very briefly 4 of them today. There are others that we might look at, but these 4 have in common that they are trying to understand what holds society together, and they are equating norm breaking with deviancy. These are also theories that understand that if society isn't working together, then things will start to fall apart and we could end up in enemy as well. There is a weakness with the functionalist perspectives in that it's argued that functionalism, that the normative theories actually place a lot of blame on the individual for their deviancy. It also assumes that there is consensus and wide understanding of what are the important goals and values within a society. I hope you enjoy exploring normative theory. We will continue in later sessions with other theories. I'll talk to you then. Goodbye.